You've talked about schools, but even if you just walk out...
Very complicated agenda.
Does it actually mean anything at all?
Okay, this is right and wrong, but it doesn't actually follow it.
We've been in a recession for a few years now.
Real stories.
We learn from one another.
Real issues. Is Islam a threat? And real views. This is Real Talk.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Real Talk. On today's show, we're going to explore non-Islamic customs, which may seem harmless, but actually take us away from God. As the world becomes more commercialized and media-oriented, we have to explore how we as Ahmadi Muslims can stay away from these harmful practices. We're also going to discuss those Islamic customs and how we should practice them without exceeding the bounds of our religion. Let me introduce our panel. First, we're joined by Sajda Zafar, who is the National Secretary for Nasirat al-Ahmadiyya, or the Young Girls Association here in the UK. Assalamu alaikum, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Alaikum salam.
Next, Shameen Butt is the English editor of the Al-Nusrat magazine of the Ladies Auxiliary of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and a translator of the community's publications. Assalamu alaikum. Finally, Navida Said is a researcher of religious scriptures. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Thank you all for joining me here today. We're going to come back to our expert panel in just a few minutes, but first we wanted to find out why customs are important and what people have to say about them. Take a listen to our word on the street.
Humans are, by nature, social creatures. We structure our lives around social engagements and markers of significant events or rites of passage. Holidays, customs, or traditions, whether they be of a religious, national, or cultural nature, inevitably bring human beings together in remembrance or celebration. Some customs simply serve as markers to remind us of our social responsibilities. For example, Mother's and Father's Days are celebrated in some countries to remind us of our duties to our parents. Yet the question arises whether such days are simply a way to ignore those duties throughout the year and fulfill them on only one day. Certain customs also have loose associations with religion. Take Valentine's Day on the 14th of February, which in many countries is a time when people express their affection to one another. Its origins are rather more brutal, marking the celebration of the martyrdom of Christian priests. In fact, it was only in the 14th century that the famous Old English poet Geoffrey Chaucer attached the notion of romantic love to the date. Like many other cultural traditions, Valentine's Day has become a day when people fork over large sums of cash to display their feelings for others. Unbelievably, its significance has begun to reach the levels of important religious holidays.
The Valentine's Day industry, I think, is very lucrative in Pakistan. We don't exactly have numbers as to what the sales are because it's an undocumented part of the economy. But if you were to look at prices, they go up by as much as 10% compared to the rest of the year. Sales apparently go up a lot because some people actually import a lot more than they would in the normal season. So I think it's something that's kind of a boon like Eid or other special holidays in Pakistan now.
On the other hand, religious traditions have infiltrated the realm of consumerism and pagan customs. Easter is the most important event on the Christian calendar. However, it has a number of associated customs such as Pancake Day and the Mardi Gras, whose roots actually lie in pagan beliefs and which encourage immoral behavior unsuitable for any God-fearing person. The same is true for Halloween, which has taken on such importance that it is celebrated without much thought as to its decidedly pagan origins. Many argue that it should not matter if we participate in such revelries, because in doing so we are participating in the happiness of others, whether it be going trick-or-treating with friends, exchanging birthday gifts, or holding large, elaborate weddings. But what message does our and our children's participation in these customs send about our role as Muslims in today's society? Is it a case of harmless fun, or might we be laying down a precedent for the introduction of harmful innovations in our beautiful faith?
And that was the word on the street. Welcome back to our studio. We're going to jump right into this with our panel today. Sajda, let's start with you. How important are customs in our society? Why do we have them?
I think customs are very important because it gives us our special, unique identity, where we come from. We have our religious beliefs, but then the customs something on top which makes us individuals and gives us a sense of who we are and where we come from. So a lot of people, as well as their religious belief, like to cling on to these as well, because especially if they've migrated from their country of origin, they like to feel that they still belong in a certain community. So,
yeah. Shireen, what is the function of a custom? What is a custom?
Well, customs, most customs have historical significance, and they stem from some basic ideas. And like the other panelist has just said, they're born out of traditions. But what we have to be careful is to weigh which custom or which tradition is to be followed, and which custom falls into a mere ritual and perhaps loses its significance.
Right.
So
Navita, just going on that, what makes a custom un-Islamic then? How do we decide that something is un-Islamic and out of the bounds of our religion?
Well, there's many customs and traditions which are followed by other faiths around us, such as Christianity, Judaism, and the customs are like Easter, Christmas, Halloween, which have some link with their faiths, but they're un-Islamic.
Right. And Shameen, what about you? How would you say what makes a custom un-Islamic? How do we decide that we're not going to celebrate something because it doesn't follow our religion?
Well, we in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community are extremely fortunate that we have the teachings of the promised Messiah alayhi salam as a guidance, and he has taught us, has he not, that anything that the Holy Prophet ﷺ did not practice is fundamentally un-Islamic.
Right, okay. We'll come back to all of that. Let's go to the audience, though, and start off the discussion. What is a custom? Why is it important in society? Why do we celebrate different traditions and celebrations in society?
I think a custom, as they said before, is something which comes from your heritage, and it's not necessarily to do with nowadays who you are, but to do with where you come from in your past, which and nowadays we see in the world that that's changing. Migration is increasing and intermarriage is increasing. So perhaps culture is changing and customs are changing. New customs are being forged all the time, which are not necessarily based on religion. So customs are how you live your life and how you practice your daily living. It might be an event like a wedding or some date of significance, but it's all about how you handle yourself and where that stems from.
Yeah. Well, what is the benefit of these customs, of these celebrations? What comes out of them? Why do we do them? Yeah.
I think religious events give us a link to God, and customs likewise give us a link to people in the society, like our family and friends, and it helps us to be closer and help one another so that we can advance in this world, and so worldly and spiritually.
Okay, that's great. Let's come back to the panel now. Navita, in many countries, religious customs are a big part of society. They become very integrated into society. And in Western countries, that's the case with Christian holidays, Christmas, Easter. But a lot of the customs and things that come along with that aren't necessarily religious, are they?
No, absolutely not. Most stuff, in fact, it's people will be amazed to find out, for example, in the Christmas tradition, many of the traditions are linked to pagan customs. And for example, well, for a start, Christmas Day, now there's much debate about the date of the celebration. And we know from the evidence of the Holy Quran that in Surah Maryam it mentions that when Mary gave birth to Jesus, she took shade under a date tree, and that's usually around spring, summertime. And the biblical verses also support this, which many people don't know. In Luke chapter 2 verse 8, it mentions that at the time of the birth of Jesus, there were shepherds abiding nearby, looking after their flock by night. And many Christian commentators know and acknowledge the fact that this is not something that would happen around the time of December because it was too cold. But because it's been followed for so many for so many decades and so many centuries, people just stick to practicing it.
Yeah. What other aspects of Christmas come from kind of the
Christmas? The thing is, people are clear that it's not celebrated on the 25th of December. So how did it come in? This was around the 3rd century, early 4th century, when the church, the official body at the time, felt that they wanted to accommodate the needs of the pagans who were converting to Christianity so that they wouldn't have to give up all their festivals. And most of the festivals were amalgamated. The 25th of December is actually the sun worship of many of the sun gods. It's the worship of Osiris, of Adonis, Mithras. And what the church felt was if they replace it with the birthday of Jesus, then this would make it superior. But in actual fact, what happened was that people didn't let go of their heathen customs. Right. The other customs associated are the Christmas tree. And the Bible in Jeremiah clearly says, do not follow the way of the heathen. Those are the pre-Christian people or non-Judaic people. And it actually refers to them putting up cutting a tree, decorating it with, in a similar way that they have the Christmas tree. Now, many Christians will argue that they have the green tree, evergreen tree, because this, for them, it commemorates the everlasting life of Prophet Jesus. But on the other side, many devout Christians will say that this is not a Christian tradition. Yeah, then you have the mistletoe and the ivy and the holly, which people place on the doors. That's also that's to ward off evil spirits, and that has nothing to do with the Bible.
So a lot of these customs that we see at Christmas time are actually, in fact, pagan, don't have anything to do with Christianity. Shameen, what then is our response to these religious customs? That thing is that they're very important to our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues. So how do we respond to that, knowing what Navida has said?
Well, we have to sort of explain it to them politely, our viewpoint about Christmas, and explain to them this is what our beliefs are. And as Navida has explained, that we believe that according to our scriptures, Mary gave birth to her son in the summertime. And so apart from that kind of explanation, it's obviously because our religion teaches us to be polite and courteous to people of other religions. So we have to be aware and mindful of their religious sentiments, but explain it to them in a very kind and polite manner.
So we should tell them?
I think we should, yeah. We should tell them very politely, but we should respect their feelings, and we should respect their traditions and their customs and their special day, no matter if we know the pagan significance of it. But our religion teaches us to respect other religions, whether or not they follow it in its pristine form or not. That's irrelevant.
Okay, Sajda, moving on to our children. How do we teach our children about these celebrations? They're surrounded by them. What do we tell them? How do we make sure that they don't feel left out at school, but at the same time they're not taking part in these activities that they shouldn't be?
Yes, I feel that it's very important to tell them both sides of the story. One is obviously the Christian side. They would learn in school what the Christians believe. But I think it's actually a great opportunity for us as Ahmadis. We might not always get around to telling our children about every prophet in detail in their story. And so it's a time where children are already interested in this thing. So it gives us a chance to tell them what we believe and tell them that, okay, first of all, we have to respect what they're saying, because obviously if they don't respect, if we don't respect them, they won't respect our beliefs either. And just generally tell them what's right and wrong, and make them be very clear as to what they can and cannot do in these occasions.
It's also, I think it's a wonderful time to, when we reflect on the actual story of Prophet Jesus and what he went through, and it's a wonderful time to tell children the true story about Prophet Mary, Hazrat Maryam, and her piety and her taqwa, how she was as a character, and how the Quranic story. So it's a good opportunity to tell them the proper story. But at the same time, I think the Islamic way is a very good way, because we're teaching our children's tolerance and respect for society, that yes, well, these are the beliefs of these people, these are our beliefs, this is our story, but we must respect the beliefs of others.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to come to the audience and ask, do you face challenges during Christmas time, either yourself as mothers or in the workforce or with your children? What are some of the challenges that you face?
I myself went to a Church of England school, and again we took part in all of the festivals that were celebrated by the Christians. We had a church that was associated with the school, and we would go to that church. And I never felt a conflict really, and I think that was because of the sense of identity and strong belief system that my parents had instilled in us, that this is what another religion believes, and we need to respect that, but at the same time this is what our take on those stories are, and this is what we believe in. And I think that needs to be made quite clear to children from the beginning, and if it is, I don't think that a conflict will arise.
Right next to you.
I think as a mother, one of the challenges is that you have to set a bar, as in sort of set a boundary at home to say exactly what Baji Niveda said, that, you know, you say, okay, take it as an opportunity to explain Islamically what we believe and instill that into your children. You can't stop or take away the traditions of any country. If you live in China, America, whatever, you know, there'll always be traditions there, but that for us as parents is for us to then seek knowledge, then to input that into our children, and then set those boundaries and levels at home where they know that, okay, yeah, we live in this country, and maybe we can look at it and we can admire it from a distance, but it's not something that we practice and that we get involved in, because obviously it goes against our religious beliefs. So it's up to us to then put those boundaries at home.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's
just a quick point to say that Islam, and particularly our community, we teach tolerance, so it has to be a two-way thing. So when it comes to Eid, we like to teach, the kids at school. I remember when I was at school, I like to tell people why I celebrate Eid, the story behind it, and it has to be a mutual thing. So it has to be, you're open-minded. It doesn't mean because you hear the story of Christmas and the Christian belief and why they celebrate what they do that you necessarily have to believe in it. But it just shows that you're open-minded to try to understand why they practice what they do and why they believe what they do. And in return, when it comes to your Islamic practices and why we celebrate Eid, I think other people will be more willing to hear us out.
Yeah. Can we ask some teachers in the audience about teaching the curriculum, teaching about these holidays to people of different faiths? How do you deal with that? And how do you deal with it yourself, being a Muslim, teaching about Christmas and other holidays? Is there anyone that can comment on that? Yeah, right in the front.
I find it really challenging, especially during Christmas time, singing the songs with the children and teaching them the songs for the Christmas play. But obviously I do refrain from saying Jesus, Son of God, or anything else that might be against my beliefs. And I do make sure during the year that I do incorporate all the children's beliefs into celebrating in class. So during Christmas, obviously the Christians celebrate. Then during Eid time, I do get the Muslim children to come up and talk about that, and we do have a little celebration for that. And during Diwali, I do that as well. Yeah. So the children are getting, and I do always stress in my class that some people believe, some people who call themselves Christian believe. So the other children don't feel left out, and I say we will discuss other religions at a later time. So.
Yeah, I think it's when our kids are in school, we want to tell others about Islam. So then we need to accept that our children will be learning about other faiths as well, and we should encourage that to some extent. Would you agree? Yes. Yeah. Can we, Navita, can we talk just really briefly about Easter? Actually, can you just talk briefly about the origins of Easter? Because we're coming up to that time of the year now.
Easter is the most important time for Christians, and it's the heart of Christianity because it is the actual belief in the resurrection, the death and the resurrection of Prophet Jesus, which Christians believe. And again, there's the customs, traditions, the Easter eggs, bunnies, everything. They're all related to pagan customs. They are nothing, even the timing of Easter has nothing to do with the, this is not something that the early followers of Jesus or the Jesus movement did either. There was no such festival. So this came in to, again, it was an amalgamation of the festivals of the pagans who believed in the eggs and the rabbits. They represent fertility, rebirth. So they're following a new rebirth. But many devout Christians won't follow the pagan customs, and they will just have a church service where they follow the resurrection.
Right, right. I just want to move on to Halloween, actually, because that's becoming quite big here in Europe. It's quite big in the US already. And Navida, what are the origins of Halloween? Why is it so?
Origins of Halloween, again, are purely pagan, from Druids and the Wiccans. The Wiccans is the modern name of the witches. And the Wicca faith is currently one of the fastest growing religions in America in this current time. And Halloween, the actual Halloween day, is a holy day in the calendar of the Druids and the Wiccans, which is a day of the dead. It's peak time for sorcery, divinations, magic, and calling circles to the dead. And again, this crept into Christianity, I would say. Again, it's for the convenience of the converts, so they wouldn't have to give up their festivals. And when the way that Christianity merged this is the night, 31st, is known as Hallows Eve. It's the evening before. Then so they even adapted the name. And then the 1st of November is All Saints' Day, where they will, again, it's a day for the dead, but they pray for all the dead, and then on the following day it's All Souls' Day.
Shameen, Islam doesn't directly refer to Halloween, of course, but what does it say about such practices, the practices that Navida was talking about?
Certainly Halloween, the practices like Halloween have no objective to them. Right. We don't gain anything from them, and they are primarily just have no end result. There's no significance, no result. So the Islamic outlook on practices like these would be that because we don't gain anything from them, and then they're just perhaps a waste of time and energy, really.
And taking us away.
Primarily taking us away from the remembrance of God. Indeed, that's the main thing. But looking at them superficially, or just sort of glancing through practices like this, one doesn't gain anything from them.
Right, right. Sajda, what about the children? I mean, their friends are going trick-or-treating. What do you say to mothers even that say, oh, it's just harmless fun?
Well, it's not really harmless fun. If you look more deeply into it, celebrating Halloween is another form of shirk, because we are telling the children they should be afraid of these spirits and the dead and all these people, whatever else that, they believe in. Whereas, and also the actual activity which they do to dress up and go door to door and ask for sweets. Again, Islam does not allow you to go begging. Right. So both of these things, although they cover them up in a nice wrapper with the costumes and everything, and the children want to do this, it can be very dangerous. It's definitely not harmless.
Yeah. It is primarily meaningless. And that's what perhaps we need to instill in our children, that it doesn't get us anywhere. We don't learn anything from it.
Right.
And
I'd also like to add here, I think it's very important how we relate to our children, and they have to understand that Islam is not about seclusion and isolation. Islam doesn't say we can't have fun, but not on a day of shirk. As mothers, sin is the biggest shirk. Of course, we're going to protect our children from associating in anything with shirk, but it's important to, put it back to them. It's turning that negative feeling into a positive. Put it back to them and say, okay, if you think that maybe don't have enough knowledge on this, let's do this together as a family. You do the fact-finding, and the information's so readily available, and let them, until they don't understand, let them understand, reflect and analyse. It's very important. Otherwise, as Baji Sharmeen was saying, that it's a dangerous road. The dangerous road can be if they see Islam as the enemy. That's very important. Even the Bible, I'm just going to go back to Father Christmas. Now, many devout Christians are actually telling their children that because of the whole, when they turn 6 or 7 and they suddenly realize that this is not true, they feel devastated. It shakes the foundation of their belief. And it's very important. So you can say to them, look, Christians, the Bible repeatedly says, don't follow the way of the Druids. Prophet Moses clearly spoke of this, and he said, don't follow the way of these people who perform circles And what's most striking, and this is a very good tablighi topic for children, is the verses which follow. Not only does Prophet Moses say, don't follow these ways or these practices of these people, but I will send a prophet will come unto you. And it's fascinating because this prophecy relates no other than to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
I'll go to the audience really quickly and get some reflections on Halloween. What do you tell your children? How do you get them to avoid that trap of trick-or-treating? Yeah.
Well, the thing is, in my experience, what I've noticed is that when children are very small, they are actually scared of the images that are associated with Halloween. My own children, they didn't like going into shops. They didn't like seeing the scary masks, the witches, the wizards, the ghosts, images. And what happens is, as they become older, they just become sensitized to that. And especially in countries like in America and in Canada, what society has done is they've tried to soften that by allowing children to dress up in Disney costumes on Halloween, and that's become accepted, whereas actually it's not acceptable. And what we need to remind our children is that this actually does have pagan roots, as was mentioned by the panelists, and that we should not be worshipping these ghosts and devils and these other aspects of the pagan festival which it originates from, and not try and soften the blow for children, really.
Right. Okay, that's one. Anyone else? Yeah.
I also think that Halloween is very dependent on location and age. Us youngsters, teenagers, do not in the UK, we don't have much to do with Halloween. It's just not very celebrated. Yeah. People are not much aware of what the roots or anything, so it's not regarded as a big festival, whereas in younger children it will be an issue for mothers. And us, we can just pass by and not be affected by Halloween.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Another thing that this going door to door and doing trick and treating custom or practice during Halloween can be quite distressing for certain people. For example, elderlies who are living on their own. Right. It can actually distress them and cause unnecessary harm to them, so it doesn't gain anything.
I just want to move on and talk briefly about some other customs that we have in society, things like wedding anniversaries, birthdays, even things like Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day. Navida, what are the origins of some of these? Are they religious or not religious? Where do they come from?
Mother's Day has a slight link to the Lent period in Easter, Mothering Sunday in England. This was because at the time of Lent people were giving up things, and then they were going away, they were worshipping, and people were allowed to come back on a particular date in the month of March, known as Mothering Sunday. In America, it's a national holiday which is in remembrance. And the main thing and again, Valentine's marks, there were 3 martyrdoms, but there was one particular saint who they remember who actually carried out marriage ceremonies in hiding, because the emperor believes that the soldiers, married soldiers, would make bad soldiers for some reason. And I think that's a lesson that society can learn, that he was actually promoting the sacred bond of marriage. So it's not how Valentine's is celebrated today. But other days like Father's Day, Mother's Day, I think we should remember that we shouldn't be needed to be reminded by a national day. Showing affection and love is an Islamic thing which can be done on any day and should be more often.
Right. Shameen, what about birthdays? What do we view them as?
Birthdays have I have to go back to the same point really, because it's in Islam we try to follow those customs which have a significance and which perhaps teach us something or enhance us in some way or the other. And celebrating or commemorating birthdays is in a way meaningless. Right. It has no. It's just the day you're born, and you just had celebrating it and spending money and having gatherings and festivities. It's meaningless, and it doesn't enhance us as a person, doesn't improve us as a person, and it doesn't help our fellow beings in any way. So
Right. Yeah.
Birthdays, unfortunately, also have pagan origins, and this whole thing about, because it was believed, the pagans believed that children are weak, and that's why they felt it was important to gather. That's how the gathering comes around. They would gather around, make loud noises, celebrate, to ward off evil spirits. And birthdays were created in the names of deities, unfortunately.
Okay, Sajda, what is the proper way then to show respect to loved ones, to show respect to our children and the fact that they are getting older, and show respect to our spouses and our parents?
Well, I can just give you my own example. When I was growing up and what we did in our household on a birthday, first of all, my mother always told us that I don't know why you're celebrating getting a year older. If you think of it in the other way, you've just actually lost another year of your life where you could have done something better, done something more for, for your religion, for your others. So she would always encourage us to start the day with extra prayers, nafal, to give some sadaqah, to remember the poor, and just generally, instead of a New Year's resolution, more of a birthday resolution as to how we can improve the next year of our life, and just generally pray and be grateful to Allah for giving us this extra life and happiness and health.
Okay, fantastic. We've got a lot more to cover in the program, and we'll go back to our audience as well. Join us after the break when we finish our discussion about holidays and move on to some of the Islamic customs that we are actually told to celebrate. Join us after the break.
An interlingual channel promoting interfaith dialogue. Worldwide, live and interactive, on satellite television and the internet. This is MTA International.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Real Talk. Today we've been discussing the importance of customs in our society and how we as Ahmadi Muslims can stay away from those un-Islamic customs that take us away from God. I'm going to go to the audience and ask them to reflect on what we've been talking about in the first half, about your experiences with holidays such as Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays and Valentine's Day. What have been your experiences and what are your reflections on what the panel has just said? Yeah, back in the corner.
Yeah, like about birthdays, I know that like when it's my children's birthday, like the panelists said that they used to do, I think on that day, and in previous sermons, our beloved Huzu, Ayadallah Ta'ala bin Ashwali Aziz has been saying that we should do self-analysis and be critical of ourselves and look for areas of improvement. So on that day, like we put up our hand and say prayers and we told them, the children, what areas that they can improve on, maybe in their salah, in their tilawah, reading of the Quran, or how to, and even their own general behavior, treating others with respect and sharing and being kind and controlling the temper. So it's good to self-analyze on that day and then pray for more, healthy, longer life, and then also just to improve in general. So I think it's good to do that than to have some big show of, entertainment for children with a clown or a bouncy castle or balloons or whatever. Of course, children should have fun. They can have fun with their siblings or cousins or whatever. Yeah. But it's important to, incorporate it with religious activities.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a point up here.
I mean, regarding Mother's Day and Father's Day, my personal experience, it's been engraved in me. Like I do it. It's just part of my life, and we just need to think paying respect to elders. It's just not only part of our religion. It should be like part of our personality, and it should be every day, no matter whether it's a particular day, Mother's Day or Father's Day.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Back there.
I think it's all comes down to what your parents teach you, and to how much they say that to what extent you can celebrate a custom or a festival. For example, going to a wedding, how much you can spend on a wedding and how much you can sort of let your boundaries out of that for the wedding. So in any custom, it sort of comes down to what you've been taught from the very beginning.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, but we have a couple other points on celebrations.
I think even if your parents don't teach you, because sometimes they don't know themselves, you should have the confidence to go out and find out for yourself what you're actually doing and getting yourself involved in, and have the confidence to say, no, I'm not going to do this, and know when to draw the limit.
Yeah, good point. One point back there.
No, I just wanted to say something about Valentine's Day, because I think what I've noticed is that Muslims are starting to celebrate this more and more, and fundamentally I do think that there are some un-Islamic traits about that, and firstly I think there's this competition edge to it, and basically each year there's a lot of pressure on having to try and find something that's a bit more romantic, or a present that's slightly more expensive than the previous years, and that puts a lot of pressure on people, which is wrong. But then secondly, there's the element of disappointment when you do get something that maybe you were hoping for something better, or somebody else gets something that's better than you, and there's that jealousy streak. And those aspects, those emotions that Valentine's Day arises in somebody are actually un-Islamic, and I think we need to be very careful about how we celebrate or be grateful for the companionship and support that we have from our life partners, and make sure that that's actually done in the correct way.
Yeah. And next to you?
I think anything that that we do day to day, be it customs, be it taking part in anything, what it boils down to is our identity. What is our sole purpose? What is our divine, right? What are we here for? Mm-hmm. The main point is, we're Muslim, we have to follow Islam. Now, if we keep it simple and we seek knowledge according to that, I think it becomes a lot easier to deal with customs, to deal with traditions and everything like that. We have to, remind ourselves, that's why we do namaz, that's why we have du'as, that's why we have, we have these things for us, because it's a time for us to understand that, okay, this is not right, this is wrong, or this is, so I think that's what we need to have, is a time of recollection that we have to understand our purpose. Yeah,
I want to come back to the panel really quickly, just for one other bit here about national holidays. Those that celebrate, for example, Independence Day, or for example, here in the UK, we're celebrating the Queen's Jubilee this year, and we celebrated a royal wedding last year. To what extent, Shameen, do we take part in these kinds of celebrations?
Well, these celebrations are for a reason. They have a goal, and the goal is to come together as a nation and to commemorate and to celebrate and give thanks for something good that has happened to our country. So most certainly as Muslims, it is part of our belief that we are, first of all, faithful and loyal to the land in which we reside, and then we sort of express and show our love and our loyalty to that land. So certainly as Muslims, we should be celebrating all the national holidays and the national, sort of like the Queen's Diamond Jubilee and all the other festivities that will go with it. Because regardless of where we live and what the country, what the faith of the country is, what religion is, we are duty bound as Muslims to follow the law of the land and to be loyal to our country and express, and especially, if I may add, in this day and age, post 9/11 world, it becomes incumbent on us as Muslims to actually verbalize, and express our loyalty to the land if you live in a non-Muslim country, because there is much said about quote-unquote deafening silence of the Muslims that they don't come up and don't say that we are loyal to our country, because there are many misconceptions in the Western world about Muslims. So as Ahmadi Muslims, it becomes absolutely our responsibility, first of all, to abide by our religion and be totally loyal to our country, and then to actually express our loyalty.
Yeah, okay. I want to shift the focus now, and I want to talk about those customs and traditions that are actually prescribed in Islam, and talk about how do we celebrate these customs without exceeding the bounds of Islam. Navida, let's start with the two festivals that are prescribed in Islam, Eid. How do we stress the importance to our children, and what is the importance of these?
The main emphasis is, as someone said in the audience, remaining within our faith and understanding what is the real objective of the day is. And for us, it's the Eid prayer. Yeah. And after the month of Ramadan, it's very important that we keep that continuity. If we've given up something, to keep focused on prayers and not to celebrate in such an extravagant way that it defeats the purpose of the object. And it's remembering, at the same time, remembering those that can't celebrate. For instance, after Ramadan, being grateful for the food that Allah has given us and thinking about the poor and needy in the world who don't have any food. And at the time of the second Eid, also remembering, again, it's learning the true story of Prophet Abraham, comparing it with Judaism, Christian stories as well. And this is a time when children can celebrate, but it's within limits.
Yeah. Yeah, Sajda, how do we make it a celebratory occasion for children, especially when they perhaps feel like they're missing out on some of the other customs of their country that we've spoken about before? Yeah,
I think it's a perfect time actually for them to be able to celebrate and to be able to enjoy themselves. And as the parents, it's the perfect time for us to do tabligh. Children can have get-togethers with their friends, invite them over, tell them why we celebrate Eid, what we do on this day, take our children to our neighbours, sharing with the food, maybe going to see the less fortunate people, going to hospitals and that kind of thing. So tell them, it's good to celebrate, it's good to have fun, but also remember the less fortunate people at the same time, and also use it as a tool for tabligh.
Yeah. Shameen, what is the purpose of Eid al-Fitr gifts? What is the guidance on that?
Eid al-Fitr is celebrated at the end of the month of Ramadan, and the month of Ramadan is the holiest month in the Islamic calendar. And the idea of celebrating, it's actually thanksgiving, thanking God for enabling us for having 30 days of worship of Ramadan, and another significance of Eid. So that's the primary significance of Eid al-Fitr. And then it's all about sharing. Eid is all about sharing our happiness and with our fellow beings, our fellow family and friends, and getting together and easing each other's burdens and problems. So that Eid has lost its, along with other religious festivals, unfortunately, in certain quarters of the Muslim world, Eid has also lost its real significance, its meaning, and its blood, and it's turned into commercialization like the rest, most things in this world, unfortunately, have turned into these days. But Eid al-Fitr, in essence, is a prayer. It's a worship which starts with the Eid Salat in the morning, and then the Eid sermon. So that's the essence of Eid. It's giving thanks to God for enabling us the holy month of Ramadan.
Sajda, you talked about telling others about it, that it's at the tabligh point. Navida, would you agree? Is this one of those times when we can actually talk about our teachings?
Yes, definitely, because I think now that Islam is a global religion and people see people celebrating Eid on different days, and that's a good time to explain why people are celebrating on different days, and explain the true proper concept of it as well. And it's also a time for, again, like Paddy said, that it has unfortunately in most parts of the world become very extravagant, where the focus is shifting more towards dressing up and looking nice and partying. And in an area where I lived, which is predominantly heavily populated with non-Ahmadiyya Muslims, there's even fireworks, and it's quite a spectacle, because unfortunately what's happening is people are coming together from all localities. They go out on the streets. The girls obviously are not in hijab or parda. They're dressed, even in cold weather, very skimpy clothes, and the boys, they're just going about in their cars, and it has a bad impact. So it gives us the opportunity to say, well, this is the true purpose and meaning of Eid.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the audience. We have a comment in the front here.
Like it said, it's a really good tabligh opportunity. I think going back to birthdays, if children don't celebrate birthdays, this is a time when you can send in sweets or cakes into schools with your kids and say, our special day, we don't celebrate birthdays, but we celebrate Eid, and now I want to share my sweets with you. And as colleagues, you can take it for your colleagues at workplace as well. So that's what I do. It's a tradition in our school to bring in sweets whenever it's your birthday, and I don't. And everybody says, oh, you didn't bring your cake for your birthday. And I said, no, I'll bring it for Eid. So both Eids, I take special sweets for them, and it's a really good tabligh opportunity for us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. A point right next to you.
I mean, me and my family, we make sure that if it's Christmas, for instance, that we make special food for the neighbors and we bring it over. And then you'll find that when it's Eid, they'll show interest and they come over themselves and they'll say, okay, what is Eid? And it's just an opportunity to do tabligh in itself.
Yeah. Anybody else? Right back there. Can we pass the mic into the middle, please?
I think with all of the things that the panel have been talking, the audience have been talking about today, I think the key is simplicity and moderation. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he loved simplicity. And there is a beauty in simplicity, in doing something very simple, giving your neighbours, a bowl of soup when they're ill, or giving them a knock on the door to say hello when it's Christmas, because that's important to them. So there's a simplicity. It doesn't have to be extravagance and spending money and being commercial. It's the simple things which connect us as humans. And that's what Islam is really teaching about, whether it's our festivals of Eid or the festivals of other people. We have to live together in harmony. And the best way to do that is not to have the competitions about the size of gift or how well decorated our house is with lights, but just to show simple human kindness, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ taught.
That's a good point. That brings me back to something that we discussed a bit earlier in the first half about this idea of fun. Is that maybe the problem? Is that this idea of fun that we have as Muslims is very different than the idea of fun that our children are perhaps growing up with? Shamin, what do you think? What does Islam teach us about fun?
Well, Islam teaches, may I just start with the predominant idea of fun, the current day idea of fun. It's a very elusive term, isn't it? What is fun? Mm-hmm. Fun is, if it means enjoyment, then by all means, Islam the Islamic teaching is that enjoy yourselves, have fun, be with the family, be with your friends, and enjoy each other's company. But we have to look deeper into this. What fun are we looking at? Mm-hmm. If fun is just whiling away the hours and just being noisy and spending money, then to what end would we want to pursue that fun? Mm-hmm. The nature is fun. Enjoy as regards children. If you want to have our children to have fun, nature is the biggest fun, biggest enjoyment there is. We should take our children to nature. Encourage them to love nature and explore nature and things like that.
Nabila, what could you add to that?
Just being happy, enjoying life with the children, and if it's not, I would say keep away from the word bribe or compensate, but whilst there are other things going on in society, let's say to our children, let others do what they want to do. We can enjoy baking, cooking and going out, as long as it's done within limits and the boundaries of Islam. For women, it would be within the boundaries of Parda if we're going out for the day, as long as we don't miss our namaz times, and being happy.
Yeah, Sajda, what would you say to children who say, oh, our friends are doing it, they're having fun, and we're not?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, of course, children are very happy when they get expensive gifts, toys, and all that kind of things. But if you ask any grown-up about any happy memories they have from when they were children, I think that most of them would relate to some event where they were doing something with their parents, rather than a time when they were playing with a certain toy, or a time when they got a certain gift. gift, it would most likely be a time when they spent with their family doing something together as a unit, whether that be at home or whether that be, you know, going out or something like that. And I think those are very special times that you can spend with your family, and that should be cherished and made most of.
Yeah. I'm going to come to the audience now. One of the times that we do tend to remember are our weddings. What are some of the pressures, though, that girls tend to come under when it comes to their weddings? You know, it's not just an occasion anymore. It seems that there's so much more surrounding weddings. This point right here.
I think girls are put under the pressure where they have to look good and they have to spend a certain amount of money on their clothes and jewelry and makeup and sort of go over the top just to sort of beat their friends or their family cousins, just to look good. I think that's one main reason.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah. We mentioned before simplicity, and I think that applies not just to when we're celebrating Eid and giving presents, etc., but it applies to weddings also. You know, we have... Even during our weddings, we should remember there is a time to give, it's an opportunity to give. So our Jama'at has set up the Mariam Fund. So we should remember actually we can think of others and still give to charity even during not just times of when we're celebrating Eid, but weddings also. It shouldn't just be about who has the most expensive clothes or whatever. Again, it's about modesty, the middle ground, and simplicity, and not a wasteful spending.
Okay, let's go back there.
I think also we're very lucky to have Hazur's guidance. So with everything, with weddings, with birthdays, we've got like a set of guidelines from our Hazur, and we're very lucky to follow that.
Yeah, point right back here.
Yeah, just to make a point, I just wanted to say that in Islam, the main focus in the marriage is the nikah, the blessing at the mosque, and the walima. Like in Ghana, they take those 2 points seriously. Yeah. They don't really make a big fuss about a wedding reception. Is that the nikah, whether the bride is there or not. In Ghana, usually they are. Like at my wedding, I was there, and I did it here about 13 years ago. But alhamdulillah, so we just done the blessing at them. Alhamdulillah, Huzur was there, so we were lucky, and we just shared the sweets and the dates, and then after, then a few days later, it was the walima. And then we were lucky to have Huzur's presence, you know. So then we did that quite big, because we invited guests and friends, and then we shared this big meal, and then we all prayed together, listened to Tilawah and Taranas and that. So I think the main focus in Islam is the nikah and the walima. Yeah. So it's just how you keep it within the constraints and not go overboard.
Yeah.
So if you want to have an engagement or anything else, maybe within the family, but maybe keep it small.
Yeah, I want to come to Shameen actually on that. Shameen, what are the necessary customs when it comes to a wedding? What is it that we must do in order for a marriage to take place?
An Islamic marriage is extremely simple, and there are two ceremonies which need to be followed in an Islamic marriage. And the first and the primary ceremony is the ceremony of nikah, where a nikah has to be announced. And that's when the marriage is solemnized, if you like. And the second and the only other part of an Islamic marriage is the ceremony of walima, which is a feast hosted by the bridegroom to announce that the marriage has been consummated. Other than that, everything else is cultural, traditional, and has no basis in the religion of Islam.
Yeah, but Navida, there are in some countries, there are some legal requirements as well. Here in the UK, it's a registration. In the US, it's a civil marriage that often take place before a nikah will take place. But to what extent do we take part in those? What is the guideline on that?
I think it also depends on which country you're in. For some countries, even within the Jama'at, require you to have the registration ceremony before having the nikah, and that should again be simple. And going back to your earlier question to the audience, I think if we look at marriages globally, the impact and it's the uniqueness. The bride wants to be unique. She wants to have a huge wedding. It's extravagant to limits beyond that. It's putting people into debt. It's the economical pressures are so much, but it's all about show. And I think the beauty of Islam is the very essence of Islam is to keep a balance. And if we can keep that balance, it keeps people happy. And by the grace of Allah, if people keep within certain limits, then they'll be happy. And I think that's the blessing of the Islamic teachings, not being extravagant. And the focus should be on the success of the marriage and prayers for the couple. And yes, being happy together in the future.
Sajda, what about some of these pressures, the clothes, the functions, the other functions that Auntie Shameen said aren't necessarily a part of the Islamic
Exactly, they've become more of a show and a competition. And like Navida said, I totally agree. If people actually paid more importance to the actual marriage than the wedding ceremony, so many of other problems we would be rid of as well. The ceremony, the actual one-day thing, is just a small part. It's your entire life afterward that follows that you should actually be making more giving more importance to. And if we gave importance to that rather than the details of your dress and the details of the menu or any other thing like that, I think we would have a much better society in whole.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your participation and for your great comments today. That is all the time that we have. I want to thank our studio audience as well for being here today, and thank you for joining us. Remember, you can take part in this discussion by sending us an email. Our email address is at the bottom of the screen. Our web address is mta.tv/realtalk, and you can also follow us on Twitter. Jazakallah again for joining us. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.